They arrived in silence, a fleet of blackened warships gliding into the system like wraiths. There was no declaration of war, no grand display of power, just the slow, deliberate encroachment of a force that had conquered hundreds of worlds before. To them, this was routine. Another planet, another species. The Galactic Empire had consumed entire civilizations without resistance. Why would this one be any different? Their emissary descended from orbit in a sleek diplomatic vessel, cutting through Earth's atmosphere like a dagger. A contingent of Earth's leaders met the envoy in a secured military installation, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. They had seen what happened to other worlds, and yet they stood unshaken. The alien was tall, draped in ceremonial robes, its elongated skull adorned with intricate metallic implants. Its voice, filtered through an artificial translator, was devoid of emotion. The Empire extends its hand to your kind. Submit, and you will know prosperity. Resist, and you will be eradicated. The room fell silent. The humans exchanged glances, not of fear, but of quiet understanding. The response came without hesitation. Stay far, far away. The emissary's eyelids fluttered, a gesture of confusion. No species had ever responded this way. Some had tried diplomacy, bargaining for better terms. Others had begged. A few had even fought, their resistance crushed beneath the Empire's war machine. But never had a species warned them. It was arrogance, surely. The envoy smirked, a calculated movement meant to unsettle lesser beings. You misunderstand, it said. We do not ask. We take. You cannot stop what is coming. There was no anger in the human's reply, no bravado, just a calm, unshaken certainty. Then you should have listened. The Empire's emissary returned to orbit, filing its report with quiet amusement. Humans were delusional, overconfident in their isolation. It was a common weakness among primitives. They had yet to see what true power looked like. The Empire's ruling council barely reviewed the report before issuing their standard order. A reconnaissance fleet would be sent to Sol. The planet's military capacity would be evaluated. The invasion, if necessary, would be swift. 3 warships emerged from the void, slipping past Pluto's orbit with practiced ease. Cloaked in advanced stealth fields, their presence was undetectable to the crude instruments of lesser civilizations. Their mission was simple: observe, assess, and report. From the bridge of the lead vessel, Admiral Karras watched Earth through augmented lenses, its blue surface serene and unaware. This was always the easiest stage of conquest. The prey never saw the predator until it was too late. Their sensors swept the planet, analyzing its defenses. Crude orbital platforms, a scattered fleet of combat vessels, and missile arrays buried beneath the surface, nothing unexpected. But something felt off. The Empire had subjugated hundreds of worlds, each one playing out the same predictable script. Yet there was an absence of panic here. No frantic attempts to contact the Empire, no desperate pleas for negotiations. They were being watched. The realization came too late. Without warning, every screen, every display aboard the Imperial ships flickered and died. The carefully engineered silence of space was shattered as alarms screamed through the corridors. Their communications systems were offline. Their engines flickered, power draining as if siphoned by some unseen force. Admiral Karras' breath hitched as he barked orders, but no response came from his officers. They stood frozen, their faces drained of color, staring at the main viewport. Hundreds of objects emerged from the dark. They hadn't been detected before, not because they were cloaked, but because they hadn't been there. They were satellites. Weapons platforms. And they were aimed directly at the Imperial fleet. The realization hit like a physical blow. Humanity had not failed to detect them. Humanity had allowed them to enter the system, let them think they were unseen, until it was too late. Then the signal came. A single, automated transmission, broadcast in perfect, fluent Imperial standard. You were warned. The void ignited. A storm of high-velocity projectiles, electromagnetic pulses, and something the Empire had never encountered before, kinetic rods, massive tungsten spears hurled from orbit with enough force to tear through warships like paper. Admiral Karras barely had time to comprehend the disaster unfolding around him. His flagship, a vessel that had crushed a dozen rebellions, crumbled in an instant as a railgun round tore through its core. The second ship, caught in the initial barrage, detonated in a silent explosion of ruptured atmosphere and failing containment fields. The third ship tried to flee, engines flaring desperately, but the battlefield was already a killing ground. A swarm of human drones, small, agile, untraceable, descended upon it like starving predators. They sliced through its hull with plasma cutters, boarding parties swarming inside before its crew could react. The battle was over before it began. For the first time in the Empire's long and brutal history, a reconnaissance fleet had been annihilated. Not by an armada, not by overwhelming firepower, but by something far worse. Preparedness. Humanity had known. They had always known. The moment the Empire's emissary had left, the war had already begun, on humanity's terms. The humans had allowed the fleet to arrive, had studied them instead, had made them think they were in control. And then, they had struck. When the transmission reached the Imperial High Command, it was met with disbelief. Surely this was an error, a malfunction. 3 warships did not simply vanish. Then the message arrived. The same cold, unwavering voice that had spoken to their emissary. "We warned you! Stay away." The High Command did not hesitate. This was no longer a minor operation. This was war. A full fleet was mobilized, an armada designed to break empires. The order was given. Exterminate them. But even as the Empire prepared for what it believed would be an effortless conquest, there was one thing it failed to understand. Humanity had never intended to surrender. And this war was already over. The Empire did not hesitate. Within days, a larger fleet was assembled, twice the size of the reconnaissance group that had vanished. There would be no more warnings, no more diplomacy. Humanity would be made an example. The fleet emerged from hyperspace beyond the Kuiper Belt, moving with the precision of a machine. The Empire had perfected war over centuries, and to them, this was just another demonstration of their dominance. They had studied the battle logs from the lost fleet. The humans had employed unorthodox tactics, exploited technology in ways the Empire had never considered. It was a statistical anomaly, nothing more. Now, faced with superior numbers and overwhelming firepower, there would be no surprises. The Admiral in command, Lord High Strategos Zeverin, was confident. His ships would bombard Earth's defenses into submission before ground forces ever set foot on the surface. But something was wrong. The moment the fleet reached the edge of the solar system, their long-range sensors began experiencing interference. Small disruptions at first, ghost signals, static bursts, but they grew worse the closer they got to Earth. Entire data streams were corrupted, rendering their intelligence unreliable. It was impossible. Imperial technology was beyond such failures. And yet the disruptions spread through their networks like a virus, affecting every system that attempted to interface with it. Communications between ships became sporadic. Then, one by one, navigational arrays began failing. The vast and ordered fleet started to drift, its perfect formation breaking apart as captains struggled to reorient their vessels. It wasn't until they attempted to reboot their systems that they realized the truth. They had walked into a trap. Humanity had prepared for this war not with raw numbers, but with precision. They had turned space itself into a battlefield before the first shot had been fired. The Empire's reliance on advanced sensor technology had been used against them. Humanity had developed countermeasures so subtle, so deeply integrated into the environment, that by the time the enemy fleet had arrived, they were already blind. The first attack came not from ships, but from the very void around them. High-velocity debris fields, carefully positioned within the system's natural gravitational wells, suddenly shifted course. Invisible to their crippled sensors, they slammed into the Empire's vanguard at unimaginable speeds. Hundreds of micrometeoroids, moving faster than bullets, tore through hulls, punctured command bridges, shredded external armor. Shields were useless. These were not energy-based weapons, not conventional projectiles, but orbital hazards weaponized with terrifying efficiency. In mere minutes, dozens of ships were disabled. Fires raged within their decks, air venting into space as entire compartments were torn apart. The fleet reeled, attempting to regroup, but that was when the second phase of the ambush began. Human warships, sleek and silent, emerged from the asteroid belt. They were nothing like the Empire's vessels, which were built for intimidation as much as combat. The human ships had no wasted space, no unnecessary ornamentation. They were built for one purpose: destruction. They did not charge headfirst into battle. Instead, they struck from a distance, using weapons that defied conventional tactics. Massive railguns, accelerated to near-light speeds, fired solid slugs that passed through even the heaviest Imperial armor, as if it were paper. Swarms of AI-driven drones, too small and fast to be targeted, weaved through the chaos, latching onto Imperial hulls before detonating in coordinated patterns that split ships apart. The Empire had seen planetary revolts, insurgencies, even full-scale rebellions. But they had never seen anything like this. The humans fought with a level of strategic brutality that no species in the galaxy had ever demonstrated. Every engagement was calculated, every maneuver designed not just to destroy, but to cripple, to demoralize, to ensure that by the time the Empire realized what was happening, it would already be too late. The Imperial Admiral barked orders, demanding a full-scale counteroffensive, but no order could reverse what was happening. Human forces didn't fight conventionally. They didn't form battle lines, didn't engage in predictable patterns. Instead, they disrupted, disoriented, and dismantled. The Empire's massive warships were turned into floating tombs, their weapons rendered useless by electronic warfare, their engines silenced by targeted strikes. In desperation, the Empire's remaining fleet attempted to retreat, but hyperspace drives refused to engage. Humanity had anticipated this too. The very fabric of space had been laced with gravimetric disturbances, hidden fields that prevented faster-than-light travel in or out of the system. The Empire's forces were trapped. The battle stretched on, but there was no doubt about the outcome. By the time the last Imperial ship was destroyed or captured, the cost was clear. Over 100,000 Imperial soldiers, officers, and crew had perished. Not a single human capital ship had been lost. It was more than a defeat. It was a massacre. The survivors who managed to escape, packed into escape pods and shuttles, carried only one message back to the Empire. Humanity was not a species to be conquered. They were not an inconvenience to be wiped away. They were something else entirely. Something the galaxy had never seen before. And the worst part? This was just the beginning. The survivors who returned to the Empire brought more than just reports of defeat. They carried fear. The kind that clung to their voices, the kind that made their hands tremble as they spoke. The High Command listened in silence, watching the recordings, the tactical breakdowns, the final moments of their warships as they were torn apart. These were not exaggerations. There had been no heroics, no glorious last stand. The fleet had been picked apart methodically, erased as if it had never existed. For the first time in its long history, the Empire had encountered an enemy that didn't just fight back, it fought smarter. Humanity had not won through sheer numbers or superior firepower. They had used every weakness, every assumption, every flaw in the Empire's strategy against them. The ruling council met in private chambers, where only the highest-ranked strategists and warlords were permitted. There was no denying the truth. The humans had crippled them, and the Empire was faced with a decision it had never considered before. Would they continue this war? Could they? They had more fleets. Entire armadas. Worlds filled with warriors, vast industrial complexes that could build thousands of ships. But that was the problem. Humanity had not fought the last battle on equal terms. They had fought on their terms. Every step of the way, the Empire had been led exactly where the humans wanted them. Sending another fleet would not change that. It would only give humanity another opportunity to refine their tactics, to turn the next battle into an even greater disaster. But pride was as much a part of the Empire as its ships and soldiers. This was not just a war now. It was a matter of dominance. If they retreated, if they conceded even an inch, then the myth of the Empire's invincibility would shatter. Other species, long crushed under imperial rule, would see the cracks forming. Rebellions would ignite. The entire foundation of their civilization could collapse. Retreat was impossible. And so, they chose escalation. The Empire had weapons it had never needed before. Strategies reserved for extermination campaigns, tools of destruction meant to end wars in days, not years. The Emperor himself approved the deployment. If humanity would not kneel, then they would burn. A fleet unlike any before was assembled. Not just warships, but dreadnoughts, planetary siege engines, automated death machines built for one purpose: to reduce a species to nothing. No more reconnaissance, no more tactical engagements. This would be total annihilation. The Empire would not risk another defeat. The humans would not be allowed to dictate the battlefield again. The fleet would descend upon their world, unleash weapons that cracked continents, poisoned oceans, and left civilizations as nothing but ruins buried under ash. There would be no warning. No demand for surrender. The journey to Earth began. A force too large to ambush, too powerful to counter with trickery. Every available warship was mobilized, a force so overwhelming that even if the humans had more hidden weapons, they could not possibly stop them all. The galaxy would witness the consequences of defiance. But as the fleet approached the solar system, something unexpected happened. The humans did not scramble their forces. They did not deploy their warships to intercept. They did nothing. No broadcasts, no threats, no final messages. Just silence. It unnerved the commanders. The enemy they had faced before had been deliberate, every action calculated. Now, there was only emptiness, as if the humans had simply vanished. As the fleet crossed the outer planets, something even stranger occurred. One by one, ships began losing contact. Not all at once. Just a few at first. A patrol ship here, a command carrier there. They would report interference, then go dark. No explosions, no distress signals, just silence. The fleet adjusted formation, closing ranks. They sent scout vessels forward, probing for hidden defenses. None returned. Then the numbers increased. Ships disappeared in twos, then tens. Entire battalions of fighters were launched to investigate, only for their signals to vanish from the tactical grid. The vast, unstoppable fleet was shrinking, and no one knew why. Panic set in. The fleet's command structure was breaking down as officers argued over what was happening. Some suspected sabotage. Others believed the humans had deployed a new kind of weapon, one beyond anything the Empire had seen before. Then, without warning, every remaining vessel received a transmission. A single message. Turn back. It was not a plea. It was not a request. It was a statement, delivered without emotion. The Empire ignored it. They pushed forward, tightening their defenses, ordering every ship to remain on high alert. The fleet had already committed to this path. Whatever the humans had planned, it would not be enough. And then, reality itself seemed to shift. Space folded, not in the way of hyperspace travel, but something deeper, something unnatural. A shadow spread across the void, and in that moment, the Empire understood. The humans had never planned to defend Earth. They had planned to defend something else. It was not just technology that had made them powerful. It was something older, something buried beneath the surface of their existence. The Empire had assumed they were dealing with another rebellious species. Another civilization that had clawed its way to the stars, fragile and overconfident. But they had never asked themselves why the humans had been so certain. Why they had warned them. Why they had known exactly how the Empire would react. The answer was clear now. The humans had not been preparing for war. They had been preparing themselves. They had unlocked something deeper than machines, deeper than weapons. Something ancient. Something the Empire had no name for. And as the first of the Empire's capital ships were consumed by the void itself, pulled into nothingness with no explosion, no trace left behind, the survivors realized their mistake. They had not come to conquer. They had come to die. The Empire had ruled for millennia, its grip stretching across thousands of worlds. No enemy had ever withstood its might. Yet here, at the edge of the human domain, its greatest fleet was unraveling. The silence of the missing ships weighed heavier than any battle. No debris, no wreckage, just void where warships had once been. The survivors felt something unfamiliar creeping into their minds, fear, not of defeat, but of the unknown. There were no signs of attack, no energy signatures or incoming projectiles. The Imperial forces had fought planetary defenses before, but this was different. It was as if space itself had turned against them. The absence of bodies, the absence of destruction, made it worse. Some commanders whispered about forbidden technologies, things spoken of only in ancient records, weapons designed to erase existence itself. But there had never been proof, only theories. Until now. They attempted countermeasures. Scan pulses, quantum sweeps, high-frequency energy discharges, none revealed anything. The vast network of Imperial ships had once been a monument to their unchallenged dominance. Now, it was breaking apart, captains turning paranoid, refusing to follow orders, desperate to understand what was happening. Then the lights flickered. Not just on a single ship, but across the entire armada. Power levels fluctuated, displays filled with unreadable static, alarms blared without reason. Weapons locked and unlocked in rapid succession, targeting systems flickering between friendly and hostile. Crews scrambled, engineers tore apart circuits looking for answers. The answer came in the form of a simple, undeniable truth. They were no longer in control. Hundreds of Imperial warships, each one built to lay waste to entire civilizations, stood paralyzed. They were still functional, still intact, yet something had stripped them of their command. Systems responded without input, engines stalled and reignited without orders. It was as if the ships themselves had been hijacked by an unseen force. Then the voices began. Not through comm channels, not from any human source, but from the very fabric of their ships. Whispered words, layered beneath the hum of machinery, too faint to understand yet impossible to ignore. It was in their own language, spoken in a tone that carried neither threat nor warning, just inevitability. Some officers gritted their teeth, dismissing it as psychological warfare, a trick of enemy intelligence. But as the whispers grew louder, forming words that each crew member understood differently, something more terrifying became clear. These were not broadcasts. They were thoughts. The Empire had never encountered anything like it. Telepathic species existed, but they were weak, their abilities limited to brief interactions. This was different. It was not a presence speaking to them, it was as if something was sifting through their minds, observing them, understanding them. Panic spread. Some fired their weapons blindly into the void, desperate to hit something, anything. They only succeeded in striking their own allies, confusion turning to chaos. Entire ships turned on each other, commanders screaming contradictory orders. The humans had never needed a fleet to win this war. They had turned the enemy's strength against itself. Then, for the first time since entering the system, the humans spoke. "You were warned." The fleet convulsed. Not from an attack, not from any physical force, but from an overwhelming sensation of weight. Space itself seemed to contract, dragging them down, pressing into their hulls. Gravity fields buckled, inertial dampeners flickered. Reality twisted in ways that defied logic. Ships that had been miles apart were suddenly too close, hulls scraping against each other in impossible ways. Engines fired in desperation, but there was nowhere to go. The strongest minds among them tried to resist, to shut out the presence invading their thoughts. But it was like trying to hold back a tidal wave with bare hands. This was not a battle. This was something else entirely. Then the disappearances resumed. Not in bursts, not in waves, but in a slow, methodical procession. Ship by ship, crew by crew, they faded. One moment there, the next moment gone. There was no flash of light, no explosion, just absence. As if they had never existed. The Imperial flagship was the last to remain, surrounded by silence, its crew paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of what they were witnessing. The final transmission sent back to Imperial space contained no strategy, no analysis, no calls for reinforcements. Just a single, repeated phrase. "They are not what we thought." And then, there was nothing. The Imperial homeworld stood in stunned silence. The greatest fleet ever assembled had been lost without a trace. There were no distress calls, no last stands, no scattered survivors drifting through space. Just an unbroken wall of silence stretching across the void where thousands of warships had once been. The High Council demanded answers, but there were none. The last transmission from the fleet had been brief, fragmented. It contained no orders, no warnings of incoming fire, no reports of direct combat, only confusion and fear. And then, nothing. It was as if the fleet had never existed. Entire sectors waited for news, expecting retaliation, an attack that never came. They feared invasion, planetary sieges, fleets of human warships appearing at the edge of their space to take advantage of the Empire's sudden weakness. But no human fleet came. No diplomats arrived to dictate surrender terms. No threats, no ultimatums. Humanity did not come for vengeance. They did not need to. The Empire fractured under the weight of its own terror. The absence of battle was worse than battle itself. Generals, admirals, planetary rulers, all of them whispered the same question: what happened? There were no wrecks to recover, no bodies to bury. The ships were gone, their crews erased. Billions of credits worth of technology, countless lives, all vanished into an abyss that defied reason. The Empire had encountered wars, rebellions, even full-scale galactic conflicts before, but nothing like this. And the worst part? There was no one left to fight. The High Council tried to cover it up at first. They blamed technical malfunctions, experimental hyperspace failures, sabotage by rebellious factions. But no one believed them. The soldiers who had witnessed the fleet's departure knew the truth. They had sent an unstoppable force into human space, and that force had simply ceased to exist. Paranoia spread. Entire fleets refused to leave their docks, fearing they would never return. Governors of distant colonies cut all contact with the homeworld, unwilling to risk drawing the attention of whatever had erased their forces. Panic took hold. Civil unrest flared on dozens of planets as whispers grew louder. What if the humans could do this again? What if they could erase entire worlds just as easily? The collapse did not happen overnight, but it was inevitable. The Empire's power had always been built on the foundation of fear of its fleets, its armies, its ruthless efficiency in crushing resistance. Now, the fear had turned inward. The moment the people realized that the Empire itself was afraid, the illusion of control shattered. Worlds that had long suffered under Imperial rule saw their chance. Uprisings erupted, not from courage, but from desperation. If the Empire could fall, then now was the time to break free. Some planets declared independence outright. Others simply fell into chaos, unsure of what to do in the absence of absolute authority. The Empire responded with force, but its military was already crumbling. Soldiers refused to march. Admirals resigned, unwilling to lead fleets into an unknown fate. No one wanted to be next. Fear of death had always kept the Empire's troops in line. But this was different. This was fear of something beyond death, beyond understanding. The whispers spread across worlds, across star systems. Stories of the last fleet, of its final moments, of the voice that had spoken to them. They were not what we thought. Legends took root. Some said the humans had discovered a weapon unlike any in history, one that could erase matter itself. Others whispered darker theories, that the humans had uncovered something older than their species, something buried beneath their history, something they had awoken to serve them. The truth no longer mattered. The Empire had been broken, not by war, but by uncertainty. By the realization that they had stepped into the dark and found something waiting for them. And humanity? Humanity remained silent. They never issued a statement. Never claimed responsibility. They did not expand, did not conquer, did not send their fleets to finish what had been started. They simply watched. It was as if they had never been concerned with the Empire in the first place. And that was the greatest fear of all. The Empire had assumed it was the predator, that it had been the one in control, choosing when and where to strike. But in the end, it was never their war. It was humanity's warning. A warning that had come too late.